The Galmari were known across 12 systems for their interrogation techniques. Their neural probes could extract information from the most resistant minds. Their truth serums could make a stone talk. Their pain inducers could break the will of the strongest warriors. Until they met Jack. Captured during a reconnaissance mission to the Galmari homeworld, Jack Stone found himself strapped to a metal table in a sterile white room. 3 Galmari stood over him. Tall, gray-skinned beings, with large black eyes that never seemed to blink. Their elongated fingers moved with surgical precision as they prepared their equipment. "Human," said the lead interrogator, whom Jack mentally dubbed Blinky. "We require information about Earth's defensive systems. Provide this, and your suffering will be minimal." Jack remained silent, his brown eyes fixed on the ceiling. 20 years in Earth's special forces had prepared him for this moment. His breathing remained steady, his heart rate normal despite the circumstances. "Very well," Blinky said, nodding to his associates. "Begin with level 1. The first interrogator, Skinny, inserted a neural probe into Jack's temple. Most species would scream at this point. The probe was designed to stimulate the pain centers of the brain while leaving no physical marks. It was elegant, efficient, and excruciating. Jack felt the fire spread through his neural pathways. Every nerve ending ignited with agony. Yet his face remained impassive, his breathing only slightly accelerated. "Curious," Blinky noted. "Increase to level 2. The second interrogator, Tall, adjusted the settings. The pain doubled in intensity. Sweat beaded on Jack's forehead, but no sound escaped his lips. "Your resistance is impressive but futile," Blinky informed him. "No species has endured beyond level 3. You will break." Jack's lip curled slightly. Not in pain, but in what almost resembled amusement. "Level 3, Blinky ordered. The pain became a supernova in Jack's mind. His muscles strained against the restraints, veins bulging in his neck. Yet still, he made no sound. His eyes remained open, staring directly at Blinky. After 10 minutes, Skinny began to look uncomfortable. "Sir, we should pause. Most subjects require recovery time." "Continue," Blinky commanded. "Level 4. Tall hesitated. "Level 4 has never been tested on living subjects. The simulations suggest—" "Do it," Blinky hissed. The pain transcended anything Jack had ever experienced. It should have rendered him unconscious. It should have broken his mind. Yet he remained awake, aware, and silent. After 15 minutes, Skinny stepped back from the console, his gray skin paling further. "Sir, the human's vitals should be failing. His neural pathways should be collapsing. But they're adapting." Blinky leaned closer to Jack, genuine confusion in those large black eyes. "What are you?" Jack finally spoke, his voice raspy but steady. "Just a human who's been through worse." The 3 Galmari exchanged glances. Tall's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the equipment. "Sir," Skinny said quietly, "I don't think this is working." "Level 5, Blinky ordered, a note of desperation in his voice. As the pain reached what should have been unsurvivable levels, Jack began to smile. Not a smile of pleasure, but one of grim determination. A smile that spoke of a species that had evolved through suffering, that had known pain as a constant companion throughout its bloody history. And for the first time, the Galmari began to feel afraid. Day 2 of interrogation began with Blinky looking noticeably thinner, the Galmari equivalent of stress-induced weight loss. Skinny and Tall stood further back from the table than before, their movements hesitant. "We've analyzed your biological responses," Blinky said, trying to maintain his professional demeanor. "Your species has an unusual relationship with pain." Jack remained silent, eyes closed as if resting. The restraints had been doubled overnight. "Your neural pathways actually strengthen under duress," Blinky continued. "A fascinating evolutionary adaptation, but ultimately irrelevant. Today we try chemical extraction." A new apparatus was wheeled in, a gleaming metal device with tubes and vials of colored liquids. The Galmari were shifting to their specialty, psychoactive compounds designed to lower resistance and stimulate truthful responses. "The solution, entering your bloodstream, contains nanites that will bond with your cerebral cortex," Blinky explained. They respond to questions by stimulating specific regions of your brain. Resistance causes discomfort. Jack's eyes opened as the first needle pierced his skin. The clear liquid burned through his veins, spreading like ice water through his body. His muscles tensed involuntarily. "Let's begin simply," Blinky said. "State your full name and rank." Jack felt the nanites activate, tiny explosions of pain in his frontal lobe. The sensation was like having his brain scrubbed with steel wool. Yet he remained silent. Blinky's large eyes narrowed. "Interesting. Increased concentration." Skinny adjusted the flow rate. The burning intensity doubled. Jack's jaw clenched, but no sound emerged. "Your species has natural resistance to psychoactive compounds?" Blinky asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Jack finally spoke, his voice steady despite the fire in his veins. "No, we just have practice." "Practice?" Tall asked, breaking protocol by addressing the prisoner directly. "High school," Jack said with a small smile. "College, Saturday nights, Monday mornings." The Galmari exchanged confused glances. They didn't understand that humanity had been voluntarily altering their consciousness with chemicals for its entire history. From the first fermented berries to the designer drugs of the 22nd century, humans had developed remarkable adaptation to foreign substances. "Administer formula KX42, Blinky ordered. Skinny's hand trembled as he prepared the next injection. "Sir, KX42 has never been used on humans. The molecular structure might—" "Do it!" Blinky snapped. The new compound entered Jack's bloodstream, designed to break down the blood-brain barrier and allow direct neural manipulation. His body arched against the restraints, every muscle rigid with strain. After 3 minutes, Jack relaxed back onto the table. His eyes opened. He took a deep breath, and then he began to laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound that made the Galmari step back involuntarily. "What's happening?" Tall asked, checking the monitoring equipment. "His neurotransmitter levels should be chaotic, but they're stabilizing." "The human biology is processing the compound," Skinny said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Converting." "It!" "Converting it to what?" Blinky demanded. Jack's laughter subsided. "Ever hear of alcohol, pal? Your fancy drug feels like a couple of beers. Bit of a head rush, but nothing special." Blinky stared at the human, his professional demeanor cracking. "Impossible. The compound should have reduced your neural functioning to a primitive state." "Yeah, well," Jack replied, his eyes slightly unfocused but alert. "Humans have been doing that recreationally for thousands of years. We call it Friday night." For the first time, doubt crept into Blinky's expression. The Galmari had encountered hundreds of species, but none like this. None that seemed to thrive on the very things designed to break them. And as Jack smiled up at his captors, they began to understand that they had miscalculated badly. On the third day, the interrogation room looked different. The sterile white had been replaced with a dull gray. The temperature had dropped significantly. The bright lights had dimmed to a harsh blue glow that cast long shadows across the walls. Sensory manipulation, the Galmari's third approach. "Comfortable?" Blinky asked as he entered. He was alone today. Skinny and Tall had been reassigned after yesterday's failure. Jack, still strapped to the table, didn't respond. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow and measured. "Your file indicates you've never experienced prolonged isolation," Blinky said, checking a datapad. "Humans are social creatures. Sensory deprivation affects your species profoundly." Jack remained motionless. "I'll return in 12 hours, Blinky continued. "Perhaps by then you'll be more willing to discuss Earth's defensive capabilities." As Blinky left, the room plunged into total darkness. The temperature dropped further. All sound ceased, absorbed by the specially designed walls. Complete sensory deprivation. A technique that had broken the most hardened operatives from a dozen worlds. What Blinky didn't know was that Jack had spent 18 months in a North Korean isolation cell earlier in his career. Before that, 6 months in an underground bunker during the water wars. Sensory deprivation was an old friend. When Blinky returned exactly 12 hours later, he found Jack in the same position. But something was different. The human's breathing was even more controlled, almost imperceptible. His body seemed completely relaxed. Have you reconsidered your position? Blinky asked, activating the lights at their lowest setting. Jack's eyes opened slowly. They were clear and focused, showing no signs of the disorientation that should have been present after half a day of total sensory deprivation. Thanks for the nap, Jack said. Haven't had 12 uninterrupted hours in years. Blinky's large eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of stress in his species. You slept? Meditated mostly, Jack replied. Then slept. It's a skill you pick up. That's not possible, Blinky insisted. Your brainwaves should be chaotic, your sense of time distorted. Jack shrugged as much as his restraints would allow. Time's always relative, and chaos? That's just Tuesday on Earth. Blinky increased the light intensity, hoping to disrupt the human's apparent calm. You understand we can continue this indefinitely? Your rescue is not coming. For the first time, Jack's expression shifted to something resembling pity. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't working because you're using pain as punishment. For humans, pain is just information. Information? Blinky repeated, genuinely confused. Pain tells us we're still alive, Jack explained. Still fighting. Every minute I'm here is a minute I'm not giving you what you want. In my book, that's a win. Blinky stepped closer, his professional veneer cracking further. No species thinks this way. Pain is universal. Fear is universal. Maybe, Jack conceded, but how we respond to them isn't. The Galmari interrogator stared at the human, truly seeing him for the first time. Not as a prisoner or test subject, but as something entirely new. In his experience, a being who had evolved in an environment so hostile that pain had become a companion rather than an enemy. What is it like? Blinky asked softly. To be human. Jack's eyes met the aliens, and for a moment, there was a connection. Two intelligent species trying to understand each other across an unbridgeable evolutionary gulf. Imagine, Jack said, being born on a world that's constantly trying to kill you. Too hot, too cold, not enough food, too many predators. Imagine evolving, not despite that hardship, but because of it. Blinky stepped back, a new emotion rising within him. The datapad trembled slightly in his elongated fingers. It was fear. Day 4 brought a new approach. Jack was moved from the interrogation room to a small cell with a single window overlooking the vast Galmari capital city. The restraints were removed, replaced by a simple energy field that contained him within. The cell, psychological warfare, making him feel like an exhibit rather than a prisoner. Blinky entered, accompanied by a new Galmari. Shorter, with distinctive markings on its gray skin. Jack nicknamed this one Spots. This is Chief Analyst Kreznar, Blinky introduced. He specializes in psychological profiling. Spots, Kreznar, studied Jack with clinical interest. Fascinating specimen. I've been reviewing your case file. 3 days without substantive results is unprecedented. Jack sat on the small cot, rubbing his wrists where the restraints had been. Glad to be special. We've been approaching this incorrectly, Kreznar said, his voice higher pitched than Blinky's. Physical and chemical methods assume a standard response matrix. Your species clearly operates outside our models. So what's next? Jack asked. Good cop, bad cop, or whatever the Galmari equivalent is? Kreznar tilted his head. I'm unfamiliar with this term. It's an interrogation technique, Jack explained. One interrogator acts threatening, the other acts friendly. Supposed to confuse the subject, make them trust the good one. Kreznar and Blinky exchanged glances. Blinky looked distinctly uncomfortable. You're describing your own interrogation techniques, Kreznar observed, freely. Jack shrugged. Why not? Doesn't work if you know what's happening. For the first time, a hint of uncertainty crossed Kreznar's features. You're very casual about this process. That's because he doesn't consider himself a prisoner, Blinky interjected, his tone suggesting he'd had a revelation. He sees this as a mission. Jack said nothing, but his slight smile confirmed Blinky's assessment. Kreznar consulted his datapad. Our records indicate humans have an unusual concept, called duty, an obligation that transcends personal welfare. Not just humans, Jack said. Plenty of species have it. But not like yours, Krasnar pressed. For most species, self-preservation eventually overrides duty. Our records suggest humans can maintain this duty concept even when it guarantees their destruction. Jack leaned back against the wall. You've been studying us. Of course, Blinky said. We've monitored your communications for decades. Your entertainment broadcasts are particularly revealing. You glorify self-sacrifice in a way no other species does. Krasnar nodded. You create heroes who endure impossible pain, who continue fighting when logic dictates surrender. At first, we thought these were simply fictional exaggerations. And now? Jack asked. Now we recognize they are aspirational models, Krasnar replied. Cultural programming that creates soldiers like you. Jack actually laughed at this. You think I'm this way because of movies? The Galmari seemed confused by his reaction. You've got it backward, Jack explained. We tell those stories because that's what we already are. Have been since we climbed down from the trees and decided the savannah looked interesting. Krasnar made notes on his datapad. Subject displays strong species-centric bias. It's not bias if it's true, Jack countered. How many of your people have voluntarily entered dangerous situations just to see what would happen? How many have climbed mountains because they're there? How many have pushed themselves to the edge of death for no practical reason at all? The Galmari had no answer. That's what you're up against, Jack said quietly. Not me, not one human, but a species that treats pain as a challenge rather than a deterrent. As Krasnar and Blinky departed, Jack could see them engaged in intense conversation. Their body language suggested disagreement, conflict within the Z. Interrogation team was a good sign. It meant they were getting desperate, and desperation led to mistakes. On the 5th day, Jack was surprised to find himself escorted not to an interrogation room, but to a large observation deck overlooking a Galmari military base. Ships of various sizes moved across the landing fields below. Soldiers marched in. Perfect formation. A demonstration of power, meant to intimidate. Blinky stood alone, hands clasped behind his back. Jack noticed the interrogator's posture was more rigid than before, his movements more deliberate, signs of stress. Impressive operation, Jack commented casually. Your species clearly values order. This is merely one outpost, Blinky replied. Our military presence spans 17 systems. The ship being loaded below carries enough firepower to reduce a small moon to debris. Jack watched the loading operation with professional interest. Good thrust-to-weight ratio on those shuttles. Efficient design, Blinky turned to face him. You understand this is the force that will be deployed against Earth if we cannot acquire the information we need? I understand that's the threat, Jack responded. But we both know it's empty. Blinky's large eyes narrowed. Explain. If you were going to attack Earth anyway, you wouldn't need information from me, Jack said. You'd just do it. The fact that you're trying so hard to extract Earth's defense capabilities suggests you're afraid of what those defenses might be. For several moments, Blinky was silent. Then, unexpectedly, he gestured to a nearby console. These are reconstructed images of the Battle of Proxima Centauri, 6 years ago. The display showed a space battle, Galmari cruisers engaging a much smaller Earth defense fleet. As Jack watched, the seemingly outmatched human vessels executed a series of maneuvers that no sane military strategist would attempt. Ships accelerated directly into enemy fire, absorbing devastating hits to land. Critical blows. Smaller craft sacrificed themselves to create openings for others. Your species lost 37 ships in that engagement, Blinky said quietly. We lost 12. By any reasonable metric, a decisive victory for us. But? Jack prompted, knowing there was more. But we withdrew, Blinky admitted. Our commanders could not understand your battle doctrine. Your ships continued fighting long after our models predicted surrender. Captains rammed our vessels when their weapons failed. Crews manually detonated their engines rather than be captured. Jack nodded. That sounds about right. Why? Blinky asked, genuine confusion in his voice. Why continue when defeat is mathematically certain? Jack considered the question carefully. Because for humans, mathematics isn't the only certainty. There's also will. Will cannot change physics, Blinky argued. Cannot alter probability. Tell that to our history, Jack replied. We've built our civilization on beating the odds, on enduring when endurance seemed impossible. Blinky turned off the display. The High Command has ordered your transfer. You'll be moved to our central research facility tomorrow. Jack understood what wasn't being said. The regular interrogators had failed. Now he would face something worse. Scientists who would study him like a specimen, perhaps even dissect him to understand the biological basis of human resilience. One question before you go, Jack said, seeing the guard approaching to return him to his cell. Why are you telling me this? Giving me time to prepare? Blinky's answer was unexpected. Because in 5 days, you have not broken. You have not begged. You have not compromised. And I respect that. As Jack was led away, he realized something fundamental had changed. The Galmari no longer saw him simply as a prisoner or information source. They saw him as something they didn't fully understand, and in that lack of understanding lay his opportunity. The morning of the 6th day began with chaos. Alarms blared throughout the facility. Guards ran past Jack's cell, weapons drawn. Through his small window, he could see smoke rising from the eastern quadrant of the complex. Not a planned transfer. Something had gone wrong. Blinky appeared at his cell, his gray skin even paler than usual. Your species' unpredictability extends beyond individual behavior, he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. What's happening? Jack asked, though he already suspected the answer. A human vessel breached our orbital defense grid, Blinky explained. A single ship, approximately 1/5 the size of our smallest cruiser. It should have been impossible. Jack smiled. Let me guess. It did something tactically irrational. It accelerated to impact velocity, Blinky confirmed. Our defense systems predicted it would veer away at the last moment. No rational pilot would continue on a collision course. But it didn't veer away, Jack said. No, Blinky agreed. It impacted the orbital station, creating a cascading failure in our defensive grid. 3 more human vessels transited into the system 17 minutes later. They are currently engaging our fleet. Jack moved closer to the energy field containing him. This is what I've been trying to tell you. Humans don't think like you do. We don't calculate odds the same way. Sometimes we do things specifically. Because they shouldn't work. Blinky's large eyes fixed on Jack with new intensity. The High Command has ordered your immediate execution. They believe you were aware of this rescue attempt. That you deliberately prolonged your interrogation to allow your people time to mount an operation. Was I? Jack asked, his expression neutral. Were you? Blinky countered. Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer. Energy weapons discharged nearby. The lighting flickered. I'd say we're about to find out, Jack observed calmly. Blinky made a decision. His elongated fingers moved across the control panel, and the energy field containing Jack disappeared. Why? Jack asked, genuinely surprised. Because after 6 days, I understand your species better than my superiors, Blinky replied. And I believe that executing you would only guarantee that your people would never stop until our entire civilization paid the price. Jack stepped out of the cell, stretching his muscles. Smart assessment. The evacuation bays are 2 levels down, Blinky said. Most security personnel have been deployed to the breach. You should be able to... A massive explosion shook the building, cutting off Blinky's words. Emergency lighting activated as the main power failed. That'll be Mike, Jack said, oddly casual about the destruction around them. Always did like making an entrance. You know the attacker? Blinky asked, bewildered. My extraction team, Jack confirmed. And they're right on schedule. Blinky stared at the human, final understanding dawning in his large eyes. This entire captivity, the resistance, the conversations, it was all calculated. Jack shrugged. Not all of it, but enough. Your people needed to learn something about humans, and now you have. What lesson is that? Blinky asked as another explosion rocked the facility. Jack's expression turned serious. That we endure, that pain doesn't break us, that we keep coming no matter what. Remember that before your leaders decide to move against Earth again. As if on cue, the wall at the end of the corridor exploded inward. Through the smoke stepped 3 armored figures, unmistakably human, despite their advanced combat suits. Jack! The lead figure called. Time to go! Jack turned back to Blinky. You should find cover. My friends aren't as forgiving as I am. As Jack walked toward his rescue team, Blinky called after him. Will your leaders listen if I request formal diplomatic contact? Jack paused, looking back at the interrogator who had spent 6 days trying to break him. Tell them what you learned here. Tell them the truth about humans. They'll listen. As the rescue team secured Jack and prepared to withdraw, Blinky watched. The humans work with perfect coordination despite the chaos around them. He understood now what his people had failed to grasp. That humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or numbers, but an unbreakable will forged through millennia of adversity. And as the humans disappeared into the smoke, Blinky knew with certainty that the Galmari's plans for Earth would need to be reconsidered, completely. 1 month later, Jack Stone stood at the observation window of the United Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching as the Galmari diplomatic vessel settled into orbit. Its sleek, silver hull reflected the sunlight, creating a dazzling display against the backdrop of Earth's blue atmosphere. Admiral Lewis joined him at the window. Hard to believe, isn't it? A month ago they were trying to extract our defense codes. Now they're here to negotiate. Jack rubbed his wrist absently, where faint marks from the restraints still lingered. Not that surprising. They're rational beings. They adapt when presented with new information. And you certainly gave them plenty to think about, Lewis remarked. The mission recordings have been studied by every military strategist in the system. 6 days of interrogation without breaking. It's unprecedented. Jack shrugged. I just played my part. Mike and the extraction team did the heavy lifting. Don't sell yourself short, Lewis said. Your interrogator, the one you called Blinky, he's leading their diplomatic delegation. Specifically requested you as part of our negotiating team. Jack raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice. He submitted a fascinating report to his superiors, Lewis continued. It's been partially translated. Want to know what he called it? I'm guessing something dramatic, Jack replied with a slight smile. The species that befriends pain, Lewis quoted. Quite the poetic title for a military assessment. Jack turned from the window. He's not wrong. Throughout our history, pain has been our teacher more often than our enemy. The Galmari ship will dock in 2 hours, Lewis said. Conference room 3. The diplomatic team wants to brief you before the meeting. As Lewis left, Jack returned his gaze to the alien vessel. He thought about Blinky, or Divisional Interrogator First Class Garltok, as he now knew the Galmari was properly called. He wondered what it had cost the alien to submit a report that essentially told his superiors they'd fundamentally misunderstood humanity. Jack's comm unit beeped. A message from Mike. Drinks later? Whole team wants to hear the Blinky story. Again. Jack smiled as he typed his reply. Only if you're buying. Turns out getting tortured for 6 days works up a thirst. He pocketed the device and headed for the briefing. The negotiation would be delicate, complex, and potentially history-changing. But Jack wasn't worried. After what he'd endured, diplomatic talks would be a breeze. As he walked, he found himself hoping that this encounter would forge something new between their species. Not just peace, but understanding. Because if the Galmari could learn to see humanity's relationship with pain, not as a weakness but as a profound strength, perhaps other species would follow. And in a dangerous universe, that understanding might be humanity's greatest protection of all. Earth hadn't won this confrontation through superior technology or overwhelming force. It had won because a single human had sat quietly in a room for 6 days, enduring everything an advanced alien civilization could inflict, refusing to break. Sometimes the greatest victories weren't won with weapons at all. Sometimes they were won with silence. The end